The Narcissist Hunting Ground. The Therapist, Part 3. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. There are certain areas of life, certain fields, certain environments, particular professions, which attract narcissists. This is because those environments cater to the provision of the prime aims more effectively than other areas. Thus, they become a hunting ground for narcissists. Naturally, this does not mean that everybody that functions in this environment is a narcissist. What it means is that there is a greater than average possibility that you will come across a narcissist in this environment. There are plenty of excellent therapists, but there are also narcissist therapists that utilize the environment to hunt for victims. Owing to the imbalance that exists, it is a very easy place to assert control over a victim. Those seeking therapy naturally want help with something, and they look to the therapist as the person who has the answers. That puts the therapist in a powerful position. Invariably, those that come to therapy may have considerable vulnerabilities, may find themselves in a position whereby they are weakened, that their self-esteem is low, that they are seeking answers and help, that they are at their wits' end. All of that amounts to an environment that can be exploited by the narcissist to control this person very easily. Often, the matters which are discussed are very personal, very private, and thus there is a lot of emotion. That equates to a lot of potential fuel that the narcissist can access. There is the opportunity through these varied victims for the narcissist as a therapist to access lots of different character traits. With a roster of different individuals experiencing different problems, that provides the therapist that is a narcissist with an opportunity to pick off many of those character traits for their own utilization. And of course, there are the residual benefits. The therapist is being paid. Some that cater to the problems of the wealthy are very well paid indeed. There's also, because of the lack of boundary recognition, the opportunity for the unscrupulous narcissist therapist to enter into an intimate relationship with the victim, thus increasing the fuel provision by virtue of intimacy and gaining pleasure by having sex with that victim. And a recent news article reveals more of the way that this hunting ground operates. The report states, "I've got a terrible habit of going too far with everything," the psychotherapist Rob Fraser texted his client. But by then, he had already crossed the line. Lack of boundary recognition, hoovering. He would stroke her hair, lack of boundary recognition, cuddle her, lack of boundary recognition, kiss her, lack of boundary recognition, and have sexual relations with her, lack of boundary recognition, all of those behaviours being benign forms of manipulation to assert control over a vulnerable individual. The victim told a professional conduct hearing about Rob Fraser's practice. He told her not to tell anyone, use of secrecy to control. The victim was a young, mentally unwell woman in her mid-20s, vulnerability to be exploited, when she sought his help, easy to control. It was August 2016. Despite her vulnerability and his position of trust, over the next 2.5 years, they would meet outside the therapy sessions. Lack of accountability, sense of entitlement, assertion of control, lack of boundary recognition. They would meet at a hotel, a cocktail bar, even his mother-in-law's flat. It wasn't just for sex. According to her testimony, Mr. Fraser would give her drugs and ask her to give him her prescription medication, residual benefit. During some therapy sessions, he was intoxicated, lack of accountability. When she brought a complaint to his professional body, the UK Council for Psychotherapy, she also accused him of using racist language, insult, lack of emotional empathy, including Muslims, paedophiles. He denied the allegations, denial, the first line of the twin lines of the narcissistic defence, and described the physical contact between them as a reparenting technique. Revision of history, distortion of facts. But she had evidence. Audio recordings of their conversations and text messages. Pausing there. Regularly, I explain to individuals that where you are taking action against a narcissist through legal means, you must ensure that you have evidence, not just your say-so. She wasn't the only woman to come forward. A second client alleged he had sexual relations with her. Lack of emotional empathy, abusive position, lack of boundary recognition. And he said, or rather she said, that he gave her a drug similar to methamphetamine, which can cause psychosis, lack of emotional empathy. Again, he denied the claims. Last year, the UKCP considered the evidence where it was claimed both of Mr. Fraser's clients suffered significant harm by his misconduct. They concluded Mr. Fraser used the therapy he was giving as a grooming process, assertion of control, access to the prime aims, which took advantage of vulnerable individuals, lack of emotional empathy, and terminated his membership, citing serious misconduct. Mr. Fraser, it said, posed an extreme danger to the public if he was permitted to recommence practicing. But that is exactly what he has done. Sense of entitlement, lack of emotional empathy, lack of accountability. Despite being struck off late last year, Rob Fraser, who also works under a different surname, continues to offer his services as a therapist. His listing as a therapist appears on a local business directory. Googling his name and therapist also brings up a profile page on the website of a therapy service in East London. It says he is offering a safe, confidential, non-judgmental space. When approached by the investigators, posing as a client seeking help for anxiety, he agreed to provide therapy via video or phone call at £50 a session. "I can fit you in," he said, and arranged the first appointment for a few days later. On the phone, Mr. Fraser said he no longer works at the clinic in East London and is in the process of setting up a new website, which will be up and running soon. Promised gain. While arranging a date for our first session, he referred to having appointments with 3 other people that day. Fraser's case is just one amid a much wider problem. An investigation revealed that counsellors and therapists across Britain who have been struck off from professional organisations for serious misconduct are still practising lack of accountability, sense of entitlement, and still seeing vulnerable clients. Some of the previous misconduct by practising therapists included therapists who failed to disclose that she was hearing voices that were telling her what to say to clients. Another tried to stop his female client reporting him for having sex with her by saying he might have cancer. Pity play. One male therapist neglected to tell one professional organisation that he'd already been struck off by another, and that while a member of the new body, he began having sex with a female client. Lack of boundary recognition, sense of entitlement, lack of emotional empathy, who then attempted suicide. Many of the cases involve therapists sexually exploiting clients. As I've explained elsewhere in my excellent book, Sex and the Narcissist, sex is a major weapon of seduction. It allows the narcissist to control and draw fuel and gain residual benefits. One had sex with his client in his treatment room. Another touched his own penis during a Zoom session. Others arranged to meet clients outside the therapy office for sex. Most were male therapists, exploiting female clients, but not all. It's demonstrative of the way that the narcissist operates within this particular environment. Another example was Roddy McDonald, who is not only a Christian, use of religion, holy narcissist, but also a warm, caring, understanding and empathic person. Fake empath. This is described in his website, which promotes his services as a psychotherapist. Yet when his membership of the ACC was revoked in August 2023, it was for having a sexual relationship with a female client who then attempted suicide. Lack of boundary recognition, sense of entitlement, lack of accountability, absence of emotional empathy. According to the ruling, Mr. McDonald moved her into his marital home that he shared with his wife, brought his wife into some of the therapy sessions, and did this despite knowing his client was particularly vulnerable. He would invoke God too, the ruling said, in a way that further fueled the imbalance of power. Triangulation. See my video, The Holy Narcissist, for more in that respect. She attempted suicide while living with Mr. McDonald. When he applied to join the ACC in 2021, Mr. McDonald never revealed he'd had his membership revoked from the BACP. Lie. After inappropriate physical contact, lack of boundary recognition, absence of emotional empathy, with a vulnerable teenager in 2016. When investigators contacted Mr. McDonald, posing as a member of the public seeking counselling with regard to anxiety, he offered a 30-minute Zoom intro session. When later approached to comment on the previous allegations, he did not respond. Nullification of threat to control by withdrawal. Another individual was just 16 when she started having sessions with her therapist, Graham Hackney. She was an extremely vulnerable child. After 3 years of therapy, evidence obtained as part of the investigation indicated that there had been inappropriate physical contact and conversations of a sexual nature, assertion of control, lack of boundary recognition. Months after the therapy sessions ended, he instigated contact with her, hoovering, meeting her in a coffee shop and at her family's home when her parents were away. She later told the conduct hearing that his actions were a betrayal of someone in a position of power. He did not respond to the allegations, nullification of threat to control by withdrawal, when invited to do so by the BACP, who struck him off in 2019. Nearly 5 years later, he was still advertising his services as a counsellor in the local paper, the Tetbury Advertiser. When contacted by investigators, he replied as Tetbury Counselling Service and charges £50 per hour. He offered the first session and signed off very kind regards, Graham Hackney. When approached by the investigators, he explained, "I ceased advertising in both the Tetbury Advertiser and Psychology Today at the end of July, having reached retirement. Therefore, I am no longer taking on clients." But it was in late August that he offered a counselling appointment to a reporter posing as a potential client. Asked at the time if he was still seeing psychotherapy clients, he replied at that point, "Yes, I am taking on new clients," evidently telling lies. In one case, it wasn't a therapist that was struck off, but an entire therapy practice. The BACP findings into Phoenix Counselling Service, which runs Palace-Gate Counselling Services in Exeter in the United Kingdom, are nowhere to be found online because its membership was revoked a decade ago. Nevertheless, it continues to operate. It was only possible to obtain the details of the ruling because one of the complainants was Amanda Williamson, who provided it to investigators. Ms. Williamson, along with another therapist at the service, brought 2 separate complaints against the service. Ms. Williamson was a trainee therapist at Palace-Gate Counselling in 2010. Her manager and supervisor was John Clapham, who owns and runs Palace-Gate Counselling under the umbrella of Phoenix Counselling. She looked up to him as a highly experienced counsellor. During supervision, he was flattering, use of flattery, to assert control, she says, complimenting her abilities as a therapist. But in 2011, she was invited to take part in bodywork sessions with Mr. Clapham, a type of therapy in which touch can be used with hands placed on various parts of the body. Although aware that bodywork can be effective, Ms. Williamson agreed mostly because Mr. Clapham said he needed to increase his hours of experience as part of his own training in the method. They had a few sessions which involved removing some clothing, but in one she became alarmed. He said, "You have a deep repressed sexual trauma, and we can only really access that if we remove your knickers." Ms. Williamson was confused because she didn't have a repressed sexual trauma, but he was adamant, she says. It felt to her like an impossible situation because this was also her boss. Breach of trust, abuse of power, lack of boundary recognition. He was due to write my reports for my qualifications in a week's time, she says. Regardless, she refused to remove her underwear. I left the session in tears. I was crying as I walked home in broad daylight. That night, she wrote about it in her journal, the pages of which she provided to investigators. The following week, he asked her again to take off her underwear, she wrote, and again she refused, before later confronting him by email. She explained, I feel I was manipulated. It really affected my confidence in myself because I felt he must have been lying when he said all the compliments to persuade me in the bodywork sessions to take my clothes off. In the aftermath of it, I questioned everything. In 2014, after nearly 2 years following the complaints brought by the two women, the BACP revoked the membership of Phoenix Counselling Services. In its ruling, the panel said that her supervisor, John Clapham, took insufficient notice of the power imbalance and that ultimately he abused the trust put in him by her. Most of her allegations were upheld, representing serious professional misconduct, and the service was struck off. 10 years on, with the business still running, Miss Williamson still grapples with the memories and what they mean. It's hard to show the internal scars that are left, she says. It's really upsetting. It's upsetting on a personal level that I sacrifice so much emotionally for nothing. It isn't only male therapists who are struck off for sexually inappropriate contact with clients, only to then keep practicing, sense of entitlement, lack of boundary recognition, lack of accountability. When Jacqueline Johnson's male client admitted to having feelings for her, she said she had feelings for him too. They had begun a form of meditation in the sessions which involved gazing into each other's eyes. They kissed, met up outside of therapy, kissed again, lack of boundary recognition. Miss Johnson went back to her client's house and they had sex. Then it happened again. Miss Johnson admitted to having a sexual relationship and to asking her client to delete messages between them which revealed their relationship. The effect on her client was devastating. The ruling said he feels he is being used for someone else's benefit. How many times does a victim of a narcissist feel that way? And that the experience has put the complainant off going to counselling again in the future and trusting in people in general. Please congratulate yourself for seeking help, Miss Johnson told investigators when they approached her posing as a prospective client. She offered a choice of dates for the first session. When asked about the allegations and the ruling against her, she said it was 2 years, 8 months ago, and since then I have taken steps to reflect on and address the matter through my own extensive therapy. I receive regular supervision and engage in continuous professional development to ensure I maintain the highest ethical standards and will continue to do so, i.e., I have changed. Thus, several examples of therapists likely to be narcissists that utilise the therapeutic environment as a hunting ground, taking advantage of particularly vulnerable individuals who are very easy to control, drawing on the fuel, obtaining their character traits, and, often, obtaining sexual benefits which amount to a residual benefit. Have any of you experienced a narcissist in the therapeutic environment? If so, what happened? How were you treated? How has it affected you? Share your observations in the comments section. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.